All right, grading the Gamecocks for the first month of the season. How would you grade Shane Beamer and company after the 3-1 start? Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. I appreciate you guys joining us. We got a fun show today, grading the first month of the season from Shane Beamer and company. Shout out to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks their first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we are a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Please go ahead and place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. I promise you, it will be worth it. You get started with a $200 bonus bet. All you have to do is place a $5 bet. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's get into the show. So, been a minute. We have not recapped the Akron game. Not really a reason to. Not a ton of news that has come from that. But we'll get into it a little bit and then also get into grading the first month of the season and the tremendous job that South Carolina and Shane Beamer have done to start 3-1 in a season where I don't think a lot of people had them starting off that hot. So real quick, the Akron game, looking back on it, you have a 50-7 win. Shout out to Robbie Ashford. Just an incredible performance for a number of reasons, not just because you're filling in for, an injured Lenore Sellers, but him getting his moment to shine, stepping in. We saw the second half of the LSU game wasn't great, and he gets to come in with a full week of practice. And then obviously we found out Friday that he is going to be the starter, and he takes full advantage of it. And also, I'm sure part of him is excited at the fact that he looked fantastic. You got a 43-point win. He put up over 300 yards of offense, and his former school looks to still be in disarray at the quarterback position, with Auburn having yet another game with 5 turnovers. So great job from Robbie Ashford. Things that stuck out to me, listen, you did exactly what you're supposed to do to this team. It's something I harped on all last week. This was one of the worst teams in all of the FBS. And you handled them the exact way you were supposed to handle them. You scored 50 points, which was incredible. You had 549 yards. You almost outgained them by 400 total yards. Held them to a little over 1 yard per carry. Just domination from every angle you looked at it. One of the things I was also impressed with, nearly 50% on third and fourth down. You went for it 5 times on fourth down, but you were nearly 50% on third and fourth combined. You were 9 of 19 there. And the other thing is the balance. This is what we've been looking for from Dowell Loggains and company for a while. This is what you've been hoping to see out of this offense, not just completely run heavy. It's great that you've been able to have so much success in the run game, but the balance, putting up 549 total yards, having 276 yards be through or be on the through the air, and then 273 on the ground. You're talking about almost split exactly down the middle, 50-50 in terms of rushing yards and passing yards. So I thought that was great. Rocket Sanders goes off really early, only 1 carry. I think he caught a pass as well. But you were fine. And it's nothing I think he was in a boot, but Beamer insisted it was nothing that was super serious, nothing long-term. You go into the bye week, and there's some interesting things about the rest that this team is going to get in the bye week, which we'll get to shortly as well. And the other part was this: you had 12 different guys catch a pass. You had a ton of guys get reps. You had 20 total players see their first game action in a South Carolina uniform under the lights at Williams-Brice. I thought that was awesome. So you were able to get in there and listen. I know it's Akron, but we also saw what it looked like against Old Dominion. So to go in there, handle your business, especially after the letdown you had a week before with LSU, thought that was great. Let's get into some of the grading of this team so far and look at some of the strengths. We'll get into a full-on comparison. It's the bye week. There's not a ton going on right now. There's not even really any practice to report on, as Beamer announced early today that Wednesday, the day we're recording this, will be the last day of practice for South Carolina for this week. They're going to have a long weekend, and then you come back and you start getting ready for that Ole Miss game, which has been announced will be a 3:30 start on ABC or ESPN. So, listen, 3-1 to start. Obviously, I think anything less than a B is outrageous. You could easily make the case that you could be 4-0. And I think that a lot of South Carolina fans or rival fans or pessimists or whoever that tend to be a little bit more negative about the program or outcomes or just in general, right? Like, I understand it. You came into a season last year where you're supposed to win 7 or 8 games. Some people thought you might be second best in the SEC East. You win 5. So going into this season and you look at the schedule and how difficult it's supposed to be and blah, 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 the first month was crucial to getting up to a good start. And you went 3-1. You could have easily been 4-0. But here's the thing, guys. You could have also easily been 2-2. That Old Dominion game is not that far in the rearview mirror, right? So I think that 3-1 is a great start. The month of October is interesting because you go into this next month and it's supposed to be the most difficult stretch of your season. You get Ole Miss at home, then you got to go to Bama, and then you're at Oklahoma, and then you have another bye week. So the next 5 weeks, you have 3 total games. 2 of them are on the road, and they're all against ranked opponents, all of them. Now that Oklahoma game looks a little bit more gettable after what you've seen from them in the first month of the season, but they also are making a quarterback change, so it'll be interesting to see how that looks as well. But overall, I think you give this coaching staff and Shane Beamer an A-. And sure, like maybe that's a little bit too high or it's on a curve because of the fact that most people didn't think they would finish at the month at 3-1. But here's the thing. It's the way that you won. And I know that Old Dominion game sucked. But since then, like one thing that game definitely did, the Old Dominion game, one thing that game definitely did was all the optimism felt like it went out the window. Like almost all of it, because then you're on the road against Kentucky. At one point you were nearly a double-digit underdog. I think it would settle around 8.5 was the line. You have struggled with Kentucky over the years, even though he had won 2 in a row, and not a lot of people outside of that locker room and outside of those that building were giving South Carolina a chance to win that game. So you go into a situation where all of a sudden it feels like you're back against the wall, but no one is believing in you. And the way that you won at Kentucky, the way that you manhandled them for, the entire game, really, that is why I think that you have to give this coaching staff a tremendous job. Listen, you won the Akron game the way you were supposed to win it. The offense has looked better at times than you thought it would. Like it looked bad the first week. It struggled at times against Kentucky, but when they needed plays, they've made plays. And, you're talking about 30 minutes without Lenore Sellers, you might easily be 4-0. You might easily be 4-0. I thought they did a tremendous job the way they won that game. And it's not easy to win on the road in the SEC. It is not easy. You look at Georgia, they went to the same building a week later. Struggle win. Like I think the final was 13-12. Could have easily lost that game. It's hard to win on the road in this league. So I think an A- is fair. Now, there's things that they need to shore up, and there's things that I think that there are huge opportunities for this coaching staff and this team. Like Lenore's has to get better on third downs. That's one of them. Like you need that figured out before you go into the next stretch of games. For Beamer, I think there's, I think that looking at the play calling, which is not on him, but the play calling that you saw in the second half of that LSU game, I think that's the biggest opportunity I've seen so far, which is, man, you really had an opportunity there to go get a win and kind of steal a win is how it felt. And you blew a 17-point lead. Now the refs were awful, but you still had a chance to overcome all of that. And if you overcome all that, then what's the psyche of this team, right? I think offensively, I would give Dowell Loggains I would say a C+ or a B-. And I think that's a tough grade to give considering the last 2 games, you put up a total of 83 points, right? But there are things that he has failed to do, especially with Lenore Sellers. And the one thing I can't get out of my mind is what happened in the second half of that LSU game when you only threw the ball 4 times. So there's just different things that I think that they can incorporate, they can do better. Because listen, Rocket Sanders, he's a little bit banged up now. You had him at 100% to start the season. Like you got him going. That looked great. The receivers looked at times better than we thought. Somebody seemed to step into that role at times when you needed it. But also, not a ton of production out of the passing game in 2 of those games. So, it is a little bit frustrating too, looking at how great Robbie was in this week versus what they chose to do with him on offense against LSU. Because here's another thing too: you had that game at home, and LSU's defense has struggled a lot throughout the season. So I think a B minus, a C plus is probably fair. There's still things that I want to see from this offense, and I want to see in terms of developing from the quarterback position. This is the next 3 teams you're going to go play are Ole Miss, Bama, and Oklahoma. You could theoretically win one of those games. Now, I think everyone in the country assumes you're going to be 3-4, and that's fine. They also, didn't expect you to get off to this start in the first place. But you need to find ways to win offensively so you're not completely dependent on how good this defense has been. Now we get into the second part of the show. We will get into the defensive grades and some of the best players so far that have stood out to me. Before we do that, we want to talk about our friends real quick at ROY. You heard me talk about this last week. It's a pretty cool concept. It's called ROY. Let me pull this up real quick. And it's a new fun way to be able to get involved in your school's NIL. It's a platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes, like directly to your favorite athletes. All you have to do is download ROY or ROY for iOS or Android and enter the referral code LOCKED ON. That's 2 words, but all caps, LOCKED ON. You'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, just void where prohibited. This week we've selected, if you want to look at a certain player, maybe it's Robbie Ashford, to say thanks for how great of a job he did this weekend. You can do that and say, listen, I'm giving Robbie Ashford, or I'm giving Lenore Sellers, or I'm giving Debo Williams $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can go show him directly and show him some love. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it adds up fast. For certain players, you can do campaigns, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for your favorite players and their standout performances this week and next and this entire season long. Help build your program and say thanks to the players that are help bringing and building your program as well. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. Support the players and change the game. All right. The other group that we need to talk about is LinkedIn. You guys have heard me talk about LinkedIn as well, especially if you're a small business owner, which I'm sure there are a ton of that listen to the show. It's a very, highbrow show. I would agree with that, right? LinkedIn is giving away, hold on one second here. It's not just a job board, right? We've talked about this like last week. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place, flat out. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. You can also post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so when we get back, we will talk about the defense as well as our MVPs from the first month of the season and give out some more grades to hang up on the refrigerator and a job well done the first month. Locked on Gamecocks continues next. All right, we are back and talking first month grades and MVPs and looking at the defense and the defensive grades we'd give to not only the staff, but also players in general, defense as a whole, and Clayton White. Now, listen, here's the deal. Clayton White has been on the hot seat. It feels like going into year 4. We talked about it in the offseason. I think that a lot of people around the league thought he was on the hot seat just because of how that defense looked a year ago in certain times. They made remarkable improvements from the first half of the season to the second half of the season last year. This might be the defense is the strength of the team. Like, I don't think anyone is disagreeing with that. But what Clayton White has done has been incredible this season so far. I understand you gave up 36 total points against LSU. That's an offense that puts up a ton of points. That's a quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier who puts up a ton of yardage. That offense puts up a ton of points, and they throw the ball all over the field. And you held your own, right? You dominated Kentucky. You dominated Akron. And here's the thing. While you didn't look great offensively against Old Dominion, you were trailing in that game. The defense is what won you that ball game. And what I mean by that too is like it's one thing to give up yards, points, whatever. I think it's a very antiquated way to look at defensive strength and how good a team is defensively just by looking up how many total yards they give up or points they give up, right? One of the things that stood out to me the most going into the season was Clayton White and that defense over the last 3 years had led the SEC in total turnovers forced in the last 3 years combined. I think it was 64 going into the season. And I remember looking at some of the numbers, and even like they had forced 17 turnovers in the red zone a season ago. Like that means 17. You're talking about more than one per game while your back is against the wall and a team is driving inside of your 20, and you get 17 turnovers just in the red zone. Like that's incredible, and it hasn't stopped. I think that was one of the concerns was, is that something that carries over year to year? And there were a lot of question marks on this defense going into the season, even though you knew it was going to be your strength. And they have answered every single one. I think from defensively, I would give Clayton White probably an A. And I understand you gave up 36 points to LSU, and there's some things that they can still be a little bit better at. But you look at what this defense has done, like at every level. You know, they're giving up 17 points per game, which is whatever. I think it's like middle of the road in the conference. But you would look at the pass defense. You rank in the top 4 in almost every major category in terms of, you know, opponent QB passer rating, opponent yards per attempt. They are second in the SEC in interceptions. What do you call it? This season with 6? They've gotten six picks. You look at the turnovers again. Something you don't usually consider that travels from year to year. And once again, you are in the lead. I'm sorry, you are second in the SEC in total turnovers forced with 9. So here we go again. And I think I want to say you're behind, like the team they're behind they're behind by like 1. Just a tremendous job of focusing on getting the ball back, creating short yard situations. And again, it's the reason you won that game against Old Dominion, the reason you are 2-2. Listen, like a sliding doors type situation here, and worst case scenario, they lose to Old Dominion. Who knows how this team bounces back? I mean, who knows? Like that is a tremendous job from a veteran group, and you did it on the back end, talking about the secondary, but the other part of that, and one of the reasons why you've been so good at being able to force turnovers and get people running for their life and being a little bit less accurate or bad again, like in the passing game, is not just the talent you have in the secondary, it's the ability you've been able you've had to get to the quarterback. I mean, and it almost seems like it's an afterthought at this point. Like, oh yeah, of course. So, like they got a great pass rush. I mean, think about that. This is a defense and a team that has finished 11th or worse in sacks on the season in the conference. 11th or worse for 5 straight years. They've been 12th or worse in the last 4 years. Right? Like, I mean, just perpetually bad. The last half decade, you have been in the bottom 4 of the SEC in terms of sacks in a season. You look at the last 2 years. Last year, they were dead last. I think they had 21 total. The year before that, they had 20. You look up now, and through 4 games, you have 14. And you're not just getting it from one person. You're getting it from several contributors, and I think that is a huge, huge deal because you have seen how big of a deal it's been in the past when, like, if somebody has all day to throw, listen, you've seen it from your own team and how big of a deal it is when you have a quarterback that is running for his life, like Spencer Rattler, the lack of protection he had the past couple of years. It's a really, really huge advantage for your entire defense if you can get that quarterback with some happy feet, running outside the pocket, and having to, not be in a drop back comfort and rhythm throughout the passing game for 60 straight minutes. It has been night and day from where it was the last several seasons. So hopefully that continues. But again, you've reached 67% of your production from a season ago, from a full season. You've reached that through 4 games. And I just think that's a tremendous job. Now, the other side of that, you do lead the SEC in sacks allowed, which is something we'll get to a little bit later. But, overall, I think it's a great job from the entire team. And it's also a great job from I'm looking at the numbers right here. Kyle Kennard with 5.5. Dylan Stewart with 2.5. You'd like to see him get some more production. I think he's kind of, tabled off a little bit or plateaued after the first couple of weeks. But everybody's gotten in on the action. I mean, everyone. So how do we continue that? How do we keep building off that? And then the other side of that, how do you get the offensive line to be a little bit better as well? But like I said, like you were near the top of the SEC in several categories defensively. So I think an A is especially with the noise you heard about Clayton White going into the season. I think an A is a very well-deserved grade for him. Like second in SEC with interception 6, second in turnovers. You lead the SEC in blocked punts, of course. Your kicking game, by the way, has been better. I know it cost you 1 game in terms of the LSU game. It's been 6 and 8 on the season. You haven't missed an extra point. Alex Herrera has looked good as well in his first year, right? In his first year kicking, and he's had some big moments too. So that is how I would grade the defense. Now, in terms of early season MVPs, one is Clayton White. I think he deserves it. I would give him. That's a guy that I remember doing a show early on, like what are the biggest keys to a bad September, and he was one of them. Just like because if he didn't do a great job in that month, the entire season gets off on the wrong foot. And he has done a tremendous job. Should be up. I don't know about for the Broyles Award, but has been one of the best coordinators and assistant coaches in the SEC in terms of consistency. And I know he's flown under the radar, but a tremendous job. Now, the other offensively, I think this one feels pretty easy, and it's Rocket Sanders. Rocket Sanders, not a ton of yards. You're talking about 286 yards, but you're averaging over 5 yards per carry. You've had 4 touchdowns, and you've had limited action. Like that last game, you're very limited. He was huge in that game against LSU. Just huge in that game. He looked like the Rocket Sanders of old. So, you're talking about 286 yards in what is basically 3 games because the Akron game doesn't count. I think he's been tremendous. Offensively, I feel like that's fair, right? I feel like that's probably where the strength of the team has been in the run game at times. Lenores has been great at times. He's also struggled at times. So from a consistency standpoint, the run game has looked good, especially, and you had some other guys that have helped out back there as well. But Rocket Sanders deserves. I think that was a big, not concern, but you were nervous about how he was going to look going into this season, because was he 100% healthy? You heard that he was, but like, was he really 100% healthy? You look at it, and he, of course, has been really good. On the other side of the ball, Nick Emanwari leads the team in tackles with 24, leads the team in interceptions. He's been fantastic. He should have not 1 but 2 pick sixes. We can go on and on and on about that. I think it's just 2. I don't remember who got the first one against LSU, because I know 2 of them were called back, but he has been great. Debo has been good in terms of production. He's second on the team in tackles. Not as good as I would have hoped. There's some. I think you could ask a little bit more out of him, and maybe he'll turn it on once the SEC play continues or starts up here in October, and the lights get brightest there. The other one is this: Kyle Kennard. What a huge get! What a huge get from Georgia Tech, transferring in. I mean, my goodness, that kid has been in the backfield, it feels like, constantly. He leads the team in tackles for loss, leads the team in sacks, has 5.5 sacks, 8.5 tackles for loss. I mean, those are really, really strong numbers, and you're only a month into the season. I'm trying to see where that might rank in general around the country, but hold on 1 second. Let me pull it up. He has been single-handedly a massive impact, obviously, but like it's hard to say he hasn't been the best player on the team, and he's been one of the best in the entire country. Like he leads the SEC in sacks. Like he's second in the country. He has 5.5. The leader has 6. Right? I mean, like that is a tremendous job. And you look at the production he's put up like throughout like his career. You know, you were excited about the fact that he had 6 a year ago at Georgia Tech, and he's almost equaled that in the first 4 games of the season. Could not ask for more out of him. Also, I want to see just from let's see here, tackles for loss as well. Yeah, and second in the country in tackles for loss. Like those are really good numbers. To put that in perspective, the leader in the country last year was Latu, the kid from UCLA that went in the first round. He had 21.5 total tackles for loss. You're talking about having 8.5. So you're over a third of the way there through 4 games. Tremendous job from Kyle Kennard. When we come back, let's look at October and go over some miscellaneous news and notes. Locked on Gamecocks closes out next. All right, we are closing out today's show with some just miscellaneous news and notes from around the Gamecocks, not just even football, but around the athletic program and department as well. Before we do, want to give another shout out to our friends at FanDuel. If you're an NFL fan, you can start the season with a big return and in a big way on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. You've heard me talk about them before. When you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play, make a live bet, whatever you're thinking. Maybe make a bet for the second half or a team going to make a comeback, whatever. You can do all of that and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with a $200 bonus. That's right. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's close out today's show with this. Looking ahead at October, I think we're going to get into the actual Ole Miss game a little bit more probably next week. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to look at some of this week's matchups and also look at just comparing how far ahead this team is or behind. But this team through 4 games versus last year's team through 4 games and what that means. Now, the miscellaneous news and notes, just projections. There's 2 things that I saw pop up that I think were both very interesting for Gamecock fans. You had 247 Sports with their latest bowl projections. You still have South Carolina in the in the Gator Bowl, which is a January 2nd bowl. It's the one they went to, I think, 2 years ago against Notre Dame. Really, really big deal in terms of, like that is anything after January 1st in general is huge. Not having to go to the Birmingham Bowl, not having to go to, the Liberty Bowl, things like that. I think that's a big step in the right direction for one. And the other thing is this: they are projected to play Boston College. I think last week it was someone different. No, I'm sorry, it's NC State. They're projected to play NC State. That's a team that was projected in the top 25. So it kind of shows you the trends of where each team is going. And the other thing was this: bracketology. It is September 25th, y'all. There is already a bracketology that has been released for the projected field in men's college basketball for next year. That has to be the best job in the world, because you are just once a week giving a guess. You don't have to be right, but a guess of who's going to land where. And it's 7 months away? Goodness. Now that being said, 10 SEC teams in the first bracketology. No South Carolina. Not a huge concern. We all know what the expectations were last year. We all know how that team performed last year as well. And I think the SEC should be really good this year. Not even really because of the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. This is probably the one sport, like a major sport, that doesn't really change or has any kind of added value with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been bad for several years. Texas, I think, is projected as a 5 seed, but they have been very, very underwhelming and underachieved a ton in basketball. But 10 total SEC teams made the list. No South Carolina. We'll see how it plays out. It's very early. Probably too early to be making the list in general, but we will get to more of that as it comes. And we'll get to more of the breakdowns of the first month of the season statistically, comparing this team versus last year's team and the last couple under Shane Beamer. We'll get to that more on tomorrow and Friday's episode. I hope all of you have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. Stay safe. I know there's a hurricane coming all over the place. We're in Atlanta and still somehow bad. So be safe. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.